Okay, so in my previous video, I brought up the inch of fish per gallon rule, and basically I talked about how I was against it. I showed my 10-gallon aquarium that has 30 plus guppies in it, and here I'm showing my 30-gallon aquarium that, as you can see, clearly exceeds an inch of fish per gallon, and pretty much all of my aquariums exceed an inch of fish per gallon. But despite that, I'm also in favor of the inch of fish per gallon rule. So that's a contradiction. I mean, I run, like every aquarium that I have, I'm defying that rule. But the thing is, I understand the purpose of the rule, and I'm against it in a sense that the way I operate my aquariums allows me to exceed an inch of fish per gallon. Basically, the type of fish that I keep, community fish, small fish, and the amount of maintenance and water changes I do allows me to do that. But the thing about the inch per gallon rule is I've heard others talk about it and how describe it as a terrible rule. But the thing is, it's not really so terrible. It's the interpretation of it that can be terrible or not. Essentially, it's the inch. When you consider an inch of fish per gallon, consider that as a starting point. If you perceive that as an end point, then it can be a terrible rule. But if you look at it as a starting point, it's a pretty good rule. Understand that it's a general rule. Look at it as a rule of thumb. And what does a rule of thumb even mean? It's an expression. It basically means, using your thumb as a measurement, but understand that not everyone's thumb is the same. So the way I use my thumb to measure something is not going to be the same as somebody else using their thumb to measure something. So looking at the inch of fish per gallon rule, it's the same way. If say, a family walked into PetSmart and, the kids saw the fish and like, oh, I want to get a fish, and their parents are allergic to dogs or whatever, so they can't have a dog, so they need to get fish, whatever the scenario is. But so, what would you suggest to an 8-year-old kid that's going to have a 10-gallon aquarium in their bedroom? Where are you going to start? Why not start with suggesting that he gets an inch of fish per gallon? I think that's a good idea. Maybe get 8 neon tetras. So you have to consider that an 8-year-old kid isn't going to do multiple water changes in a week. He's just going to think like, oh, he's just going to put food in the tank and that's all he has to do. So yeah, the inch of fish per gallon rule is an excellent rule in that situation. But if you're considering myself, and I have all these fish, I've even started with the fish that I've added to this aquarium would have alone exceeded an inch of fish per gallon, not to mention all the live bearers having their own babies and tripling the population. But I'm willing to do multiple water changes and every week and have a decent amount of plants that allows me to do more to, exceed the inch of fish per gallon. That's the thing, it's not necessarily a set rule, but it's just it's a guide to start with. And what I don't like is seeing or hearing people use the examples of, oh, the inch of fish per gallon is a terrible rule because that means that you can have a 10-inch Oscar in a 10-gallon aquarium. But no one has ever suggested that. Any chain pet store employee is not going to mention the inch per gallon rule and say that a 10-inch Oscar is okay in a 10-gallon aquarium. They're going to start with a 10-inch per gallon rule, but then if somebody were to point to an Oscar and be, okay, well, that's an exception. You have to make an adjustment. You're going to need a bigger tank for that kind of fish, so that inch of fish per gallon does not apply. So using that as a example against the inch of fish per gallon is really a straw man. It's not a good example. But yeah, it all depends. I mean, the inch per gallon is essentially a starting point. I think part of the reason why the inch per gallon rule is described as a terrible rule is because some people actually do take it literally, and those people might, I haven't really experienced much of it because I don't have much of a following, but there are going to be those like the fish police out there that know of the inch of fish per gallon rule, and then be like, oh, you're breaking the rules. You're only supposed to have an inch of fish per gallon. You're harming your fish. But as long as we're willing to put more time towards maintenance of an aquarium, then yeah, you can exceed it. But knowing that the average person that doesn't have multiple aquariums, it might just have their one aquarium in their home, an inch of fish per gallon for them might be more suitable. So I hope all that makes sense and it wasn't too much rambling. All right. So in case you didn't already know, I'm Jeff, and I enjoy fishies and I enjoy kitties. Thanks for watching.